Alright, hi, this is Audie, and I'm here doing the August challenge, trying to come up with some unique concept designs. Basically, what we're going for here is utilizing each of the three components in a way that can be incorporated into my universe. Um, So basically, instead of directly copying the ideas and picking something boring like putting ore on a crab, or something like that, the giant crab out of Moana, I decided that for each of these challenges, I'm going to keep a strict rule that it must conform to the reality of my alien universe. So here you see me sketching various ideas in universe. We have a traveling chef on his mount, and I'm incorporating some of the themes already early on. I've got the crab utilized as armor on the dinosaur. You can't really see it now, but the crystals have been utilized as a power supply. So in universe, a certain type of crystal that I've come up with is the power supply mainly used by my people. So this is actually fit in rather well. I also incorporated the same color crystal in, you know, dangly things hanging off of the traveling caravan. Um, so after I came up with the basic ideas, I decided to create three separate canvases. This is the first of the three, and as you can see, I forgot to hit record. So basically, you're missing the section of me doing the line work and the tweaking and all of that. But this is the first real view of the breakdowns that I started to create of the little guy in his little pop-up shop serving some delicious worm meat to the guests. And I thought it was a really cool idea that I came up with, so I went full steam ahead with it. And as you can see, I wasn't really 100% on the colors, so I messed around with them off and on, off and on. The creature I had already created, he's part of my IP, and so I just transferred him into this little concept and built upon it. I've got the crab's shell as armor on his back. Obviously, the claws are armor on his limbs. We've got amethyst crystals hanging from a sunshade attached to mechanical arms on the back of the chair. I kind of referenced elephants, um, Asian elephants, Indian elephants, this sort of thing, plus adding my own sci-fi elements. So you can see there's a bag that has hexagons on it that has a shovel inside of it for digging the pit where the chef will insert his crystals because they need to be, centered pretty evenly underneath the grill. So you don't want them, off center and then have too much heat in one part of the grill. So we went with that. And then this is just basically me detailing. I'm using the textures of the knives as details on the cutting board and a few other things that you'll see later in the video, which I thought was very clever. um, as for the chef himself, he's using bowls with the same kind of green gilding on them as well. Again, um, taking inspiration from the knives. So that was one way they were incorporated into the general theme. The other way I incorporated the knives was the hilt and scabbard of the one that appeared to be made out of ivory. It had an iridescent sheen on it, so I decided to make the grill itself based on those colors. So the legs of the grill have the darker iridescence, and then the actual grill itself has the lighter iridescence. And then, of course, like some rusting and age from constantly being traveling and, wear and tear, general use. The creature that he's cooking is a gigantic worm from the deserts. So clearly, he is a great hunter and a chef, and he enjoys cooking for the local people who happen to be traveling through the deserts that he also explores. Now, in this part, I decided I didn't really want to go with the idea of the nuclear powered crystals directly under the heat of the grill, so I added a power cord connecting the two because it just seemed more logical if you can actually control the amount of heat directly rather than nuclear powered rocks just kind of sitting underneath your grill and hoping you don't incinerate your delicious worm meat. And with that, the first page is done. Next, I wanted to do a view from the back, showing, the little dinosaur enjoying himself a soak, rolling around in the water, this kind of thing, and then also what the sunshades would look like opened up. Obviously, it was sort of just my own enjoyment at this point. I've got the idea, it's solid, I'm running with it. I also did breakdowns off to the side of the bowls themselves, and then since the little chef had multiple bags on his dinosaur, I included cushions because you can't very well have entire chairs fitting into little backpacks. So he's got cushions that he offers to the guests while they're eating his delicious barbecue worm meat, as well as a breakdown sketch of the dinosaur himself. He's just a cute little fella. Not much to say about it. They're called Dinamos. They're from my universe. They like eating plants and leaves, and they are a native to the desert, so they have no problem with the harsh climate there. As you can see now, I'm just detailing the breakdowns and doing, concepting here and there. I did do a texture and then obviously put it into perspective and then placed it on top of the sunshade itself because I wanted it to be a bit more perfectionist than I probably should have cared about. And here you just see me painting the sand in, adding some generic plant assets. These are aquatic plants from the Clip Studio store. I will later go in and paint them in properly. But right now I'm just getting a feel for the scene itself. It's quite bright, and I don't normally work with colors this bright, so it was a bit of a challenge, but one that I definitely have enjoyed. Now, as you can see here, I'm starting to detail the water. I'm adding in the water line, some sand ridges that you can see inside the water. And don't worry, he's not floating on top of the water. We're going to put him inside the water shortly. I'm basically just setting up the scene and getting everything sorted like how I want it, and then I add in the water on top of the dinosaur himself so that he's not floating on top of the environment. Now I do the little close-up of him in the foreground, adding in his textures, stripes. He has little tiny scales that I add in, this sort of detailing, as well as the cushions and the knife itself. Now, funny thing about the knife, it's straight up from my universe, so totally sci-fi, a manathine-based knife, the same as the blue crystals in the first page that we saw. So it's essentially a nuclear-powered knife. However, I totally forgot at this point that it was supposed to be made partially out of bone/ivory. So you'll see me at the very end of this part of the video correct my mistake and make the middle section of the knife white. I was also having a bit of problems with the perspective of the cushions underneath the sunshade, so I went and used a couple 3D assets from the Clip Studio store, set them up, got them looking how I wanted, and then just drew them in by hand. Basically, the rest of this is just detailing, shading, painting the plants, adding highlights, things like that, making everything look good and shiny. And then I start to add in, descriptions of everything going on. I add some delicious grass that the dinosaur is munching on, and just in general detailing the entire scene. Alright, from here, I start doing all of the rest of the details. Basically, wrapping up this section. Not that much left to say about it. It's just generalized tweaking, adding a little edge to the sunshades, things like that. Details in terms of labeling everything on the breakdown, and wrapping up, making things clean, checking typos, that sort of thing. And then you'll see at the very end is when I finally realized, oops, forgot to color that half bone, half mana knife, so I go on ahead and do that. Alright, and with that we are starting on the final page. This one was a bit complicated because I wasn't really sure how I wanted the layout of the page itself to go, so you can see in the beginning I'm just doing basic things, adding on some clothing designs to the little guy eating at the chef's restaurant. Just generalized ideas, and then I decided to alter the breakdown of the sunshades and show more like how they're stored in transit and things like that, as well as doing an important breakdown of the crab turned armor, because some people didn't really understand what was going on with that, so I figured I would do a 3D-ish turnaround of the claw into armor. As most people know, crab claws are in fact hollow, as are their legs. Same for lobsters. So you could fundamentally stuff anything inside of them. And in this case, we stuffed the dinosaur's legs into the crab's legs for protection from the gigantic sandworms. And from here, I just begin inking after I've got most of the things like sketched out. I just want to start inking in and getting it done. I'm using a very textured ink pencil brush that I just got recently. I also use the same brush for painting. So it's a really great brush, but the downside is when you have to do fine detail work like little tiny lines, for example, the lines on the marinade brush that the chef is holding, these tend to get all glitchy and gross looking, so I had to swap to a rather clean inker to do the tiny details in this case. And that's only because that section of the canvas is actually significantly smaller, which means everything in it is smaller. If that scene had been the entire page, it wouldn't have been an issue, but because it was, I kind of had to improvise, and I really like the texture of that brush, so I wanted to keep using it stubbornly. So there are points here and there, like the straps on the guest's outfit. They are inked in a traditional, just small round brush. Pretty much everything else is used the textured pencil, including the dinosaur in the background. I did have a bit of trouble with him initially, so I referenced several different pictures of iguanodons to try and come up with the anatomy of him rolling around in the muck. It was a little bit taxing, but I think for what it is and that he's rather in the background, it worked out pretty well. So I'm not going to dwell on it. You can see that I just kind of inked him in really fast and then just kept moving along because I was really eager to get this final page done. Um, there had actually been about a week gap, like a 5-day gap in between the previous page and this one because I had a minor injury with my back, so I hadn't been able to work. And then when I finally was, I just really wanted to get this done. Granted, the idea as a whole was super fun and I loved it, and this was a great challenge, and I will totally do it again. But just in this particular moment in time, it was like bad timing to get an injury, so I just wanted to push through this third page, and so it's not quite as on the level as the previous two, but I think that's okay because this one's just a follow-up page. It's not meant to be excessively detailed. It's just meant to show breakdowns and details of all of the different components of the first two pages. So we got the armor breakdown, we have how the grill and cutting board store together while the chef is in transit. The same thing with the shades. And also, I threw in his data pad because remember, this is a sci-fi universe, and as semi-fantasy as this picture happens to look, this is still a entire race of people that have extremely advanced technology, and after they leave the military they can do whatever they like once they've done their service. So in this case, we have the chef. He decided to trade in his firearms for a chef's knife, which is greatly appreciated in the deserts of Amari, where he is. It's a red desert, very hot, very little plant life and water. So when he comes through and sets up his little shop, anybody that also happens to be traveling through that expanse of the desert gets the notification ping and they come out and have a good meal, give him a few credits, and then, take a break, rest, get out of the sun for a bit, and then continue on their own travels. And right now, I am just doing basic detailing on the guest. So his skin tone, fur tone, I suppose, pattern, horns, things like this. They're dragon people, so obviously they would have horns. Anyway, incorporating the same colors from the first couple pictures of the chef right onto the next one. These pretty solid design, very simple. I like simple. And then I just start photo bashing together the wonderful um, stone wind chimes. So originally I was thinking seashell, but Amari is pretty far away from the coast, at least where he is. So I thought maybe something more like agates or geodes hanging, and then the crystals that were in the reference images as well. So I tossed one of those in for fun. And then I just really had a blast trying to figure out how to do this holographic display of the desert itself and his location pinging on the map so that everybody nearby can find his stall and come get something delicious to eat. He is slathering that gigantic worm steak in some very spicy red sauce, and as typical for the Amarans, they really enjoy hot and spicy things. Despite coming from a hot and spicy desert, they eat hot and spicy as well. So it's just heat upon heat. That's pretty much their culture. And being a southern dweller himself, he is more than happy to add extra spice whenever somebody asks. Now, right now, I'm basically feeling it out what I want to do for the dinosaur in the background. He is in water, technically, it's not mud. Oasis are sometimes mud in the dry season, but in this case, it's kind of the wet season. The water level's a bit higher, so it's more watery than mud. So, originally, I was going to have a bunch of mud dripping off of him, but I decided to nix that in favor of just water. So he's making a big mess, splashes everywhere. And of course, the chef is like, oh no, you're gonna get mud and water in my delicious food, stop rolling. In general, it's a very fun scene. And the last thing I'm going to toss in is something I just threw in. I used to do Arc Dossier fan arts type thing, so I decided to put the first 2 pages in this setup. So hopefully you like it. And thanks for watching. Bye bye.